So Warren Buffett says there's really only 2 rules to money, investing, and building wealth. And that is rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. So what we're talking about today are the top 10 money mistakes that people make that keep them poor. If this is something you're interested in, let's go ahead and get started. Hey, what is up, everybody? My name is Sean, and if you are new to this channel, welcome. If you are all about personal finances, increasing your income, investing, building wealth for yourself, and ultimately creating financial freedom, then more than likely this is a great channel for you. So after you watch this video, make sure you check out some of my other videos as well. I'll put some in the description box below, but also be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. And just before we get started, there is one thing that I need to address, and that is the like button. Anytime you hit the like button, the subscribe button, or you comment below, it actually signals the YouTube algorithm that this is useful information and content that other people could benefit from, and it actually pushes these videos out to more people. Now listen, we have all made money mistakes. It's impossible to go to your entire life without making a money mistake. It's inevitable. However, the real goal is to figure out how to minimize the number of mistakes that we make and to make sure that the mistakes that we do make aren't too drastic or too big. So we're going to talk about 10 really big mistakes that people make that cost them a lot of money and financial freedom. And honestly, it's probably cost me already $75,000 to $100,000. So let's discuss this. So mistake number 1 is not paying yourself first. This is a very, very common mistake and a very easy thing to do because let's face it, it becomes really challenging sometimes to save money. So if you have the problem of having too much month at the end of the money, then this one might be for you. One of the best ways of guaranteeing that you actually save money every single month, and it's a strategy that very, very wealthy people do, is that they pay themselves first. So what the heck does that even mean? So typically when someone does a budget, they take their after-tax income and they start subtracting all their expenses, things like their rent, their groceries, their food, their clothes, all their memberships and Netflix and Prime and all that wonderful stuff. And they look at the very end of it and typically you see $0. What we need to do is we need to actually budget for savings. And this is called paying yourself first. And this needs to be the very first expense on your budget. So let's say you have an after-tax income of $4,000 and you decide that you're going to pay yourself first. Now, my recommendation is that at the absolute minimum, 10 to 20%. It really should be around 15 to 20% for sure. But let's say you decide on 20%. Well, 20% of $4,000 is $800. So what you would do is you would start out with $4,000 and you would subtract $800 from that amount, leaving you with $3,200 left. Now that $3,200 is what you have to live off of. Now, a lot of you might be thinking like, well, wait a second, hold on. I mean, I can't even save on this amount. How am I going to save 20% and continue to remain on that? Well, this comes with Parkinson's law. For those of you who don't know what Parkinson's law is, basically it states that the amount of space or volume you allow something to take up, something will naturally expand to fill it up in that time. In other words, if you give yourself 1 week to finish a project, it's probably going to take you a week. If you give yourself a day, you will figure out how to finish it in a day. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to start forcing yourself into an environment that pushes you to save. And I can promise you that you will find other ways of getting by and making it work. The second mistake that people make is thinking that once they make more money, they will actually save more money. This is a very easy trap to fall into because let's face it, it's really expensive to live. And we think, wow, if I just made like $10,000 more a year, I would just take the $10,000 and I would save it. But this is almost never the case. And I want you to think about this. If you've been working in the marketplace for at least the last like 5-10 years, more than likely you probably are making a little bit more than you did now. Could be a couple dollars an hour more, could be $10, $20 an hour more, or even more than that. But I want you to ask yourself, are you actually saving a much greater amount now than you were back then? For most people, the answer is no. And that is because as we start to make more money, going back to that Parkinson's law again, is that we start to justify why we need to start making purchases or increasing certain lifestyle changes. The rule of thumb is this: if you can't save money now, you're not going to save money when. The third money mistake is keeping up with your friends or keeping up with the Joneses. It is said that we are an average of the 5 people that we hang around most. And so it becomes really easy when you hang out with friends who have very expensive taste very expensive lifestyles, it becomes very easy to adopt their mindset and adopt their way of living. And let's face it, according to statistics, very few people are actually actively saving money and are not living paycheck to paycheck. One of the things you want to ask yourself is, do I want to be rich or do I want to look rich? One of the things that has really helped me stay very, very frugal when a lot of my friends were getting really nice apartments and driving nicer cars was that I would ask myself and I would show myself how much money I'm missing out on in the future if I fail to save money. And I remember going online and realizing that even $400 a month could equate to millions of dollars over the course of my life. So having that kind of pain and realizing what I'm actually missing out on in the future really would help me save money and live more frugally compared to my friends. The next major mistake is waiting to invest. Now, this is the biggest one that has cost me a ton of money. When I first moved to LA, I had $400, I had no job, and I spent all my time reading finance books, learning about building wealth and saving, and I started doing a very good job. The problem that I had though is I wasn't taking my knowledge and I wasn't going out there and actually doing what I was learning about. And it took me until I saved $40,000, which is around, 2 to 3 years before I actually started investing. That one simple mistake of waiting to invest until I learned more information has already cost me at least $50,000, $60,000 over the course of these last 8 years of my journey. My suggestion is this. The very first thing you need to make sure you do is have all your high interest debts paid off first. Once you do that, make sure you save about 4 to 6 months of an emergency fund. Now, once you have those two things in place, at that point, you should be putting a big chunk of your savings into investing and building your accounts and investing for your future. Remember, the earlier you get started, the more time you have on your hands for compound interest. And that is the biggest key to really building wealth for yourself, is having a lot of time on your hands. So the fifth big money mistake that people make is excessively using credit cards to gain reward points or cashback offers. This is something that is very, very common because let's face it, it becomes very enticing when we can buy something and get rewarded for something else in return. The problem with this is that it tends to cause us to spend just a little bit more than we typically would because once again, we justify, well, I know I'm spending a little bit more here. However, it's okay because I'll get some discounts later on, or maybe I'll get some free flights or something out of it. The key to building wealth for yourself is staying very, very diligent. So my recommendation is just pay for everything in cash. If you are going to buy something on a credit card, then I would purchase it on a credit card and then immediately pay it that same day through your checking account or your debit card or something like that. That way you can still cash in on the reward points, but then you also are getting a more accurate account balance of what you really have. Now, the sixth major money mistake is not having a proper budget. Now, we touched on this a little bit in the very first one on paying yourself first, but it is really, really important that you have a very good system in place for tracking your money and tracking your expenses. Failing to plan is planning to fail. And being naive or being ignorant of your finances is not something that's going to benefit you or help you long term. When I first started, I used to create spreadsheets and even used apps to make sure I tracked every single expense. Now, in terms of apps, there are a million apps out there. One of the ones that I really loved using was Mint.com. And Mint.com will actually categorize your expenses. It'll give you a breakdown of your net worth based on how much money you have in your accounts, how much debt you have, and different things like that. So it's a very, very useful tool. There's also things like Betterment.com, which are some good accounts that you can have your money stored into that will give you some higher interest on your accounts. But overall, there are a million different types of accounts and apps that you can use. My recommendation is find one that you really like that helps you keep track of your purchases, and really get a very strong written out budget or an app that will track everything and continue to push on saving everywhere you can. Because remember, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. Now, the seventh one is relying on one income source only. The average millionaire has around 7 streams of income. So if we're wanting to also become millionaires ourselves, we need to find other ways of making extra income. This is another one that actually I made the mistake of pretty early on that actually cost me quite a bit of money. And there's a lot of advantages for this and a lot of reasons why you should be doing this. The very first one is when you have all your eggs in one basket, If that basket goes away, well, now you're screwed. In addition, you have more opportunities to make more money, because if you work at a job, more than likely you're being paid per hour, and you are tapped at how much you can make per week based on how many hours you work. But when you have other income sources, it allows you to make more money than your salary or your hourly rate at, let's say, 40 hours a week. So overall, it's a really good way of hedging risk and having all your money in one basket. And it's also just a great way of getting extra cash you can use to invest for your future to build more wealth for yourself. Once I started utilizing this, I started making way more money, and I just took all that money into savings and investing, and that allowed me to build wealth at a much faster rate. The 8th money mistake is getting used to having debt. This is very, very common in today's society, because let's face it, especially if you are in your 20s just getting out of college, or if you're in your 30s, but honestly, pretty much at any point in life, we are pretty much crippled with debt, with massive student loan debts, getting out of college, buying your first house, getting a car. It's a pretty typical thing nowadays in American culture to just sign on to debt and say, okay, well, I can make the monthly payments, so I guess this is okay. We need to get into a habit of avoiding debt at all costs, and that even includes things like student loans. Every single time we go into debt, we have to look at the return on investment. So whether it's going to college, buying a car, buying a home, we have to ask ourselves, how long is it going to take me to get my money back? Or what kind of opportunities is this providing? And will I be able to pay off that debt very fast because of it? So one of my big tips and advice is try to avoid all debt at all costs, unless if it's going into an asset, which is putting money into your pocket every single month. So the 9th money mistake that people make is being complacent with their current income. Honestly, I think this one has probably cost me $50,000 to $100,000 on this one alone. So when I first moved to LA, I didn't make very much money, and I was hustling and I was working really hard trying to figure out how to earn more money. But eventually it got to the point where I was steadily making around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and this began to make me feel kind of comfortable because I had enough money to pay my bills, and I was still saving a little bit of money on the side. And I thought, okay, this is a nice little balance here. I got too complacent. It wasn't until a few years later when I started realizing how slowly my savings rate was going and how long it was going to take me to live the lifestyle that I wanted, that I started really putting more effort into building my skill sets and finding other streams of income. Once I did that, my income was able to boost up to 6 figures, and that allowed me to save an exponential amount of more money. And it's something that I wish I had done earlier, because if I had had a couple more years of that amount of income, I would have had so much more in savings. I could have invested that, and that money could have grown even more. So honestly, that mistake alone has probably cost me well over 6 figures. So the 10th money mistake is trying to get rich quick. Listen, we have all been there. I've made this mistake plenty of times myself, and let's face it, building wealth is a slow process sometimes, and it's very challenging. And when we see opportunities or things in our face that says, hey, like you can make a ton of money really fast, it becomes really easy to be enticed by these opportunities, whether it's to make some like rare investment, or to invest in some sort of business model, or whether it's to invest in things like penny stocks. Listen, there are so many ways of trying to get rich quick. But the one thing I can tell you is that very, very, very rarely does this ever work out for people. Now, I have also made this mistake, and I've probably invested in over $10,000 in different opportunities or investments and things to try to help me expedite my getting rich process. But let me tell you something, there really is no secret to building wealth. It really comes down to financial discipline. It's creating a budget, living below your means, taking that money, saving a portion of it, and then investing it in good, solid investment strategies that will compound over time, bring you wealth. Do not try to get rich quick, get rich for sure. All right, so those are the top 10 money mistakes that keep you poor. I want you to comment below which mistakes you have made. I've made a good chunk of these already. So hopefully if you haven't made the mistake yet, you now know what to look out for. But please be sure to comment below. Smash the like button if you can. Hit the subscribe button. Stay safe and stay well.